The year 1789 marks the beginning of the French Revolution, which was sparked by the growing dissatisfaction of the French people with the social and political conditions. Immediately following the overthrow of King Louis XVI, the people began to focus their attention on Marie Antoinette. In 1793, Marie Antoinette is taken captive and sentenced to death by guillotine under the French Revolution. She is surrounded by people in the streets who throw debris at her as she is being walked up, and everyone shouts after she is beheaded, with her head being exhibited as a symbol of victory. An aspirational young captain from Corsica by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte is observing the gathering. Amidst the beginning of the Reign of Terror in France, Maximilien Robespierre ascends to the position of authority. In spite of the meager resources available, Napoleon and his brother Lucien meet with Paul Barras, a leader of the Revolutionary Army, in order to lay the groundwork for the siege of Toulon. Napoleon devises a plan to carry out an assault on the town that is located near the harbor. Despite the fact that his horse is struck by cannon fire, he continues to advance and ultimately prevails over British soldiers on the battlefield as well as by destroying their ships while they are at sea. After some time, Napoleon is promoted to the rank of general. The deposition of Robespierre is followed by an unsuccessful attempt at escaping, and then he makes an unsuccessful attempt at ending his own life. He receives a sentence of execution by guillotine, and the Reign of Terror is eventually brought to an end, followed by the release of more than 41,000 prisoners. During the summer, Napoleon goes to a dance, and it is there that he had his first contact with Josephine de Beauharnais, a widow of aristocratic family. As a request from his mother, Eugene, Josephine's son, approaches Napoleon and inquires about the possibility of retrieving the sword that belonged to his late father. In order to initiate his courtship with Josephine, Napoleon takes a sword from a random location and gives it back to him. In the end, the couple decides to be married after beginning an active intimacy. It is revealed to him that her ex-husband was recently put to death. Later on, it is shown that Napoleon is leading a suppression of royalists who are planning an uprising. He is seen shooting them down in the streets that they are in. Later, during the Battle of the Pyramids, Napoleon makes his way to Egypt in order to free the country. Josephine begins an affair with a soldier named Hippolyte Charles while he is away from home. In spite of the fact that he was advised that this would be considered desertion, Napoleon decides to return home. During the time that Josephine is coming back from a trip away, he goes back and throws all of her possessions outside in the rain. Napoleon is adamantly reprimanding her for her adultery, despite the fact that he, too, has been involved in extramarital affairs in the past, despite the fact that he asserts that he did not love the other women. Moreover, Josephine retorts that Napoleon is nothing without her presence in his life. Napoleon meets with the Directory to discuss his departure, but, instead of praising them for their bad leadership of France, he condemns them for their decisions. In order for Napoleon to assume the position of first consul, Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès is successful in persuading him to launch a coup effort. Once the incumbent leaders have been coerced into resigning, the coup is successful, and Napoleon and Lucien are able to persuade their troops to support them in their fight against the opposition. Napoleon is later crowned Emperor of France, and Josephine is crowned Empress of France. However, Napoleon surprises everyone by snatching the crown and placing it upon his own head, making himself sound like the rescuer of the nation. In the near future, Napoleon collaborates with Caulaincourt and Talleyrand, the foreign minister, in an effort to establish a coalition with the Austrians and England. Nevertheless, he is repeatedly unsuccessful in his endeavors. The response that Napoleon gives to this is one of childishness. He yells at the messenger of the king and then storms off. After a year has passed, Napoleon collects his troops at Austerlitz in order to fight against the forces of Russia and Austria. During the time that he and his men are waiting in the woods, he utilized the cannons to break through the ice and plunge the opponents into the frigid water. He does this by luring them out onto the ice. After some time has passed, Napoleon has a dinner with the Emperor of Austria, Francis I, while Tsar Alexander I declines the invitation because he is furious about the loss of his men. In addition, Napoleon expresses his gratitude to Francis for the fact that he did not completely destroy his army. The fact that Napoleon and Josephine are unable to produce a child on a consistent basis prevents him from having an heir. Letizia, his mother, has him have sexual relations with a young woman in order to determine whether or not he is the reason for the infertility. Letizia eventually informs Napoleon that he had impregnated the young woman, and as a result, Napoleon and Josephine quickly begin making preparations to divorce in accordance with the law. In the course of their ceremony, which takes place in front of a council, Josephine hesitates to read her portion of the decree, and Napoleon slaps her until she finishes reading it. As a result of her relocation to the Château de Malmaison, she and Napoleon continue to maintain their correspondence with one another and continue to write letters to one another. Alexander and Napoleon have a meeting in order for Napoleon to attempt to court one of his sisters. However, Napoleon's oldest sister is already engaged, and the other sister is too young. Subsequently, he makes arrangements for a partnership with Austria by marrying the Duchess Marie-Louise. A year later, she gives birth to a boy for him. The sight of his child causes Napoleon to shed tears, and he later brings him to Josephine so that she can meet him. The refusal of Alexander to sign his peace treaty prompts Napoleon to begin making preparations for an invasion of Russia in the year 1812. Even though they suffer the loss of more than 28,000 French soldiers during the Battle of Borodino, they are still able to emerge victorious. He is in charge of his men. As they continue their journey into Moscow, they discover that the entire city has been entirely evacuated. After spending the night in a tent, Napoleon wakes up to see that the Russians had set fire to the city. It is informed to Napoleon that if they make that trek, they will not be able to survive the winter. This is despite the fact that Napoleon wants to advance in order to catch up with the Russian army. In spite of the fact that nearly 500,000 men have lost their lives along the route, the army is moving back toward France. Consequently, Napoleon is eventually compelled to step down from his reign and go into exile on the island of Elba as a result of this. Josephine is still receiving letters from Napoleon in 1815, even after he finds out that she has become unwell. After leaving the island, he searches for a way to return to France, and shortly after that, he encounters his former warriors and manages to persuade them to continue to be loyal to him. In the event that Napoleon makes his way back to Josephine's residence, he is informed by her daughter that she has passed away due to diphtheria. In mourning for his ex-wife, Napoleon sheds tears. In preparation for the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon continues to strengthen his force in preparation for a confrontation with Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, and his army. An intense battle breaks out, and despite the fact that Napoleon's army is giving it their all, the English warriors are able to defeat them. When the armies of Prussian Marshal Blucher come after Napoleon's army, and they surrender, Napoleon is forced to retire. A salute is still given to Wellesley by Napoleon at the same moment. Napoleon is exiled once more, this time to the island of St. Helena. He is transported there for a period of time. While two little girls are playing in the vicinity, he uses the chance to write on his memoirs. Despite the fact that they had been told otherwise, he states to them that he was the one who started the fire in Moscow. After that, Napoleon hears Josephine's voice begging for him to join her once more, and after a little period, he falls to the ground after hearing the voice. According to the concluding sentence, Napoleon Bonaparte passed away in the year 1821. More than 3 million enemy soldiers were slain when he was in command of operations in over 80 different wars. France. Army. Josephine, were reportedly his last words before he passed away. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this.